Adam Bandt, welcome to the program.
Morning.
How do you think Australia should respond to these tariffs?
Well, I don't think that retaliatory tariffs right now is the right reaction, but not for the reasons that Labor and Liberal are putting forward. I think Donald Trump is dangerous. Donald Trump is a threat to peace. He's a threat to democracy, and he's a threat to Australia as well. And Donald Trump right now is attacking marginalised communities at home and delivering for billionaires, and abroad he's attacking allies and ripping up long-standing arrangements. Now, this should be a wake-up call for Australia that we need to rethink our relationship with the United States. It is being led by a very dangerous man. We should get out of AUKUS. Now is not the time to be hitching Australia's wagon to Donald Trump. It puts Australia at risk, and it is billions of dollars that is being spent on submarines that might never arrive. Even the United States Congress has said they're not building the submarines at the rate that is needed to in order to abide by the AUKUS agreement. But one of the things that it does do is paint a very big Trump-shaped target on Australia's back, and now is precisely the wrong time for that to be happening.
Just on the retaliatory tariffs, you said you don't think now's the right time for that, but for different reasons to the Labor and Liberal parties. So why do you argue we shouldn't apply retaliatory tariffs?
Well, this idea that somehow we could strike some kind of new deal with Donald Trump, perhaps by imposing tariffs and then perhaps seeking some kind of new commercial arrangement, I just think is wishful thinking. It's clear, like today it's steel and aluminium, and tomorrow it might be pharmaceuticals or beef. It's clear that Donald Trump does not have regard to long-standing arrangements with other countries. I think there's strength in numbers at the moment. Donald Trump is doing this to other countries around the world, and economically we should be exploring diversifying our relationship with those other countries who are also on the receiving end of Trump's actions. But in terms of a lasting arrangement now for the future, it has to be much more based on what's in Australia's interests rather than hoping Donald Trump will ride to the rescue or somehow give a special treatment. It's clear that he won't.
You said, in fact, you've never supported the AUKUS agreement, to be clear, but what about other areas of our relationship and partnership, the joint facility at Pine Gap, the US troop rotations in the top end? Are you saying we should walk away from all of it?
Saying that Australia is now put at risk, and Australia is becoming a less safe place, and it makes the world a less safe place to say that militarily and defence policy we continue to contract out our defence policy to the United States now that it is being led by Donald Trump. Like, it is absolutely clear that that Donald Trump is dangerous. And like, take those AUKUS submarines, for example. Yes, we have always opposed that, but the Labor and Liberals said we need to buy nuclear-powered long-range submarines. Now, that's not about the defence of Australia. That's about being part of an attack force of the United States. And so are those other installations that you mentioned. And I think that is not going to make Australia safer. And just look at the Ukraine at the moment, like thinking that Donald Trump will ride to our rescue if there's any security threat is now absolutely wishful thinking.
I want to come to Ukraine, but just to be clear, are you saying boot the Americans out of Pine Gap and the top end?
Look, I think the priority at the moment should be to end AUKUS, to end the AUKUS agreement. We do have a long-standing position, as you've just said, about those other facilities, but right now, look, the Prime Minister and the government just gave Donald Trump the best part of $1 billion just in the last couple of weeks for submarines that may never arrive. And what's happened in return? We've got tariffs imposed on us and now the threat of more. That is something we could concretely do right now. Instead of spending hundreds of billions of dollars on submarines that may never arrive, but let's put Australia's interest first.
We've relied on this US alliance for decades. If we walk away from it, walk away from AUKUS and other elements of it, do you acknowledge we're going to have to increase defence spending considerably?
What we're going to need to do is ensure that public money is being spent on the defence of Australia, and that we've got a defence force that is fit for purpose. Now, over $300 billion being spent on nuclear submarines, where we're thoroughly reliant on the United States, not only for the delivery of them, but then for the running of them and how they get deployed. At the moment, like Labor and Liberal have made that the centrepiece of the defence strategy. There's better things that money could be spent on, and what we need is a the defence force that is fit for purpose for defence, not being an offshoot of Donald Trump's military adventurism.
I mean, you could reallocate that money, is what you're saying, but overall defence spending as a percentage of GDP, do you accept that would have to increase given the deteriorating strategic outlook if we don't have that alliance with the US?
Well, I think the first thing to do is look at the existing budget and work out whether it could be better spent. And as I say, like we've had costed the AUKUS contributions. It's over the near term, the next decade. We're looking at $70-odd billion being spent on it. Now, reallocating that would go a long way to ensuring that Australia has a fit-for-purpose defence force.
Whether we need to go beyond that and increase defence spending as a percentage of GDP, as many are arguing.
Well, look, I would say the priority at the moment is to work out whether we're spending existing money well. And I just don't think that after we've seen what Donald Trump has done, what he's done with respect to Ukraine, what he's done with respect to Australia, I don't think there's any argument anymore that somehow having a defence policy that's based on Donald Trump riding to the rescue is a good thing for our country.
Should Australia be open to sending peacekeepers to Ukraine if there is a peace agreement?
Look, right now, our preference would be not to be putting troops in harm's way. But look, we have to wait to see, is there a peace? What is the agreement? What is the request that is being made? There are things that could be done right now, though. I mean, the ABC reported a couple of weeks ago that Australia is still the largest buyer of Russian oil. And it's meant to be sanctions imposed, but what's happening is there's loopholes in those, and Russian oil is still coming to Australia in huge amounts. It's just coming via third parties. Now, we were the first ones to call for sanctions on oil. Let's stop buying Russian oil. Let's put some pressure back on Russia. I think that's a practical thing that Australia could do right now.
Okay, but when it comes to peacekeepers or some sort of support for peacekeepers, you're saying you're still open to it? Can you just clear that up?
Well, at the moment, there's no concrete proposal on the table. It's not clear what that would look like. And if there was one, that we'd have to look at it. Our preference is not to be putting Australian troops in harm's way. If you'd ask me now, like, should it happen right now? Well, on the basis of what we understand now, no. But let's have a look at whether there is a practical proposal that's actually going to be put. But we can do things right now, and we should put sanctions on Russian oil right now.
Let's turn to some other domestic matters. Power prices, we found out the other day, are set to rise again in the eastern states, up to 9% in New South Wales. The Australian Energy Regulator says it's due to coal outages and low solar and wind output. So what do you think can be done to bring down power prices quickly?
One thing I'd like to see is government stop treating electricity as an opportunity to make billions of dollars of profit and instead start treating it as an essential service. Now, the government owns a electricity generator and a retailer. We could start selling electricity at cost price to households and businesses and stop treating it as an opportunity to make profit. Now, if the government did that, you could save hundreds of dollars off people's power bills. I think we need a bit of a shift in this country to start treating electricity, I think, a surplus mentality, understanding we have got an enormous amount of sun and wind, and if we back it up with storage, we could really drive down the cost of electricity in this country and make it a place that you bring your businesses to from overseas, deliver cheap electricity from households. A bit of a mind shift is needed, and I think the government could play a big role in that, given its stake in a publicly owned generator and retailer.
You're talking about Snowy Hydro?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
The energy market operator says 26 new gas plants are needed by 2050 to support renewables. Obviously, Snowy's getting involved in that as well. Are you opposed to any new gas plants coming online?
Look, there's plenty of gas in the system at the moment. Like
not according to the market
the transition.
Operator.
Well, we need to fast track the build of renewables and also of storage. Like build more storage than is currently being spoken about. Things like off-river pumped hydro, investing in batteries, all of those things, together with the gas that's in the system. But what's happening, David, is that the gas corporations are sending the gas offshore tax-free and then claiming that we've got shortages here in Australia. It's time to make them pay their fair share of tax. We've got enough gas in the system. Let's invest in storage and let's fast-track renewables.
Okay, but does that include opening new gas plants to actually deliver gas to people's homes?
Look, we don't think there's a need for that. If you invest in one of the things that hasn't been done and is not factored into those forecasts that you're referring to, is we've got to start working out how we can get people off gas onto cheaper, cleaner electricity. What can we do to drive down demand? Make it easier, for example, for people to switch from gas to induction cooktops, that kind of thing.
It's expensive, though, initially, isn't it?
Well, it's better than cooking the planet because gas is as dirty as coal, and we've just seen communities smashed by a cyclone. We've got people still dealing with the aftermath of floods, and we know these extreme weather events are being fuelled by coal and gas. Now, we should be having a discussion at the moment about how to take real climate action and stop opening coal and gas mines. And instead, we've got a government that's approved over 30 new coal and gas projects and an opposition that wants even more. We're going in the wrong way.
Okay, look, I won't get into the debate about gas dirtier than coal. I want to move on to some other things in the time we've got, Adam Bandt. Look, the budget, you've written to the Prime Minister ahead of Budget Week next week, pressing him to move to legislate the wiping of student debt or the reduction of student debt by 20% and also the tripling of the bulk billing incentive that you want to see. What else would you like to see in this budget?
Look, we've got a real opportunity in this last week, now that there is going to be a budget week, to deliver some real help for people. We've been pushing for some time to wipe student debt. Government says that they'll do it 20%. Let's get that locked in. That shouldn't be held ransom to the outcome of the election. The Greens pushed for GP for free since October last year, and the government's picked up part of that as well. Let's lock that in. Look, this is a real opportunity, this budget, I think, to deliver some real cost of living relief for people, dental and mental health into Medicare, wiping student debt, building homes that people can afford. And we can fund it by saying to those 1 in 3 big corporations that pay no tax, it's time to pay tax.
Just on an internal matter in the Greens, Drew Hutton, one of the founders of your party, has spoken to the Saturday paper over the weekend about the indefinite suspension he's been given from the Greens. He says there's been an authoritarian response to a Facebook post of his in which he said he believed in full human rights for trans people at the same time as supporting the right of women to be safe from patriarchal oppression. Has Drew Hutton been treated fairly by your party?
Look, there's obviously a process that's going on within the Queensland Party, and as the parliamentary leader, it's not appropriate for me to comment on that, so I'll allow that process to work its way through. Our position is clear, which is that trans rights are non-negotiable. I want to make also clear that as we head towards this election and we see Peter Dutton trying to import Trump-style politics to Australia, waging culture wars, attacking marginalised communities as a distraction from the fact that he's got no answer on cost of living, I'm not going to be joining in those kind of dangerous culture wars in the lead up to this election.
Or Donald Trump. We're talking about one of the co-founders of the Greens here. So is it unacceptable to say women should be safe from patriarchal oppression? Is that not on in the Greens?
Look, again, David, there's a process that is going through. It would not be appropriate for me to comment on that. I think I hope you can respect that and understand that there's a process that is taking place within the Queensland Party, and it's not my role to be commenting on that.
Okay. Look, finally, on the looming election, the Greens currently have 4 seats in the lower house. How many do you expect to win this time?
Well, hopefully we can increase our representation in the lower house. We're within reach of winning seats right across the country, and we're campaigning hard not only in the Senate but also in a number of other lower house seats as well. And the experts are saying that we're heading towards a minority parliament, and I think that offers a once-in-a-generation chance to get some real action on the cost of living crisis and the climate crisis. Should that be what the Australian people deliver, then our position is clear. We'll keep Peter Dutton out and we'll get Labor to act on the cost of living crisis, on the climate crisis.
If your number of seats goes back, if you lose seats at this election to either Labor or Liberal, will you stay on as leader?
look, come back and ask me that after the election. My job between now and the election is to make it clear to people we can't keep voting for the same two parties and expecting a different result. Like, there's a reason that the experts are saying we are heading towards a minority parliament. People want real action on the climate, want real action on housing, on healthcare. And last time there was minority parliament, the Greens got dental into Medicare for kids. This time we could get it in for everyone.
So if it is a hung parliament, if we do see you and other crossbenchers in a negotiating situation as to who is going to form government, you've already said, haven't you, that there's no way you'd back a Peter Dutton coalition government. Does that guarantee that you would support Labor?
So we would not support Peter Dutton. I want to see Peter Dutton kept as far away from the lodge as possible. His Trump-style politics of division have no place in Australia, and this has to be the election that we say we will not import that here into this country. He punches down, he emulates himself on Trump.
Okay.
So there's then the question about, well, what would the parliament look like? And we're saying very clearly, look, our preference would be to work with Labor, and we want to ensure that we've got stable and effective and progressive government, that we get some outcomes for people, and we would go into any discussions in good faith, with an open mind. It would depend on the composition of the parliament, who else is sitting there on the crossbench. Look, we've had this situation before, as said in 2010, dental into Medicare for kids, and we cut Australia's pollution.
The point is, if you're saying no way with Peter Dutton, you'll obviously have to support Labor.
Well, our preference is to work with Labor and to have an understanding that to keep Peter Dutton out.
Or would you be after a formal agreement, or just?
Open mind, David. It's about delivering outcomes for people, and I guess what we're saying is, like, in a situation where at the moment less than a third of the country votes for the government, a bit more than a third of the country votes for the opposition, and about a third of the country votes for someone else, what people are wanting is more voices at the table, to push Labor to act on some of these things that they've been ignoring. And the flip side is that when you have greater representation in Parliament, we've all got to work together and cooperate to get outcomes for people, and that would be the spirit we'd go into it with.
Adam Bandt, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, David.